Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Now let's begin. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at Riverside Park. Children laughed on the swings. Families spread blankets under the trees. Joggers passed by with headphones in, lost in their own worlds. The sun was warm, the breeze gentle. Everything looked perfectly normal. But in a quiet corner, away from the playground, two little girls sat on flattened cardboard beside an empty bench. They weren't playing. They weren't laughing. They were just there. The older one had bright red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She sat very still, her arms wrapped protectively around a smaller girl, maybe 3 years old, who leaned against her, pale and quiet. Too quiet for a child that age. People walked past, a man with a dog, a couple holding coffee cups, a woman pushing a stroller. They glanced. Some looked twice, but they all kept walking. An older woman slowed her pace as she passed. She noticed the girls, their dirty clothes, their tired faces, the way they seemed so out of place. She hesitated, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. They must be with someone, she thought. Someone nearby is probably watching them. And she walked on. Officer Sarah Mitchell was cutting through the park on her usual patrol route. She'd walked this path hundreds of times. Same benches, same trees, same familiar faces. But today something caught her eye. Those two girls, sitting alone. Something about them felt wrong. Sarah changed direction and approached slowly. "Hey there," she said gently, crouching down a few feet away. "Are you girls okay?" The older one looked up. Her eyes were guarded, cautious, old eyes in a young face. "We're fine," she said quietly. Sarah glanced at the younger girl. She wasn't fine. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin looked too pale. Her lips had a faint bluish tint. "What's your name?" Sarah asked. "Emily. And this is your sister?" Emily nodded, pulling the little girl closer. "Grace." Sarah's training kicked in. She'd seen sick children before. This child needed help. Soon. "Emily, how long have you two been here?" Emily hesitated. "A while." "Where are your parents?" Emily's face tightened. She looked away like the question hurt. "My mom. She's not here anymore." Sarah's heart sank. "Okay, what about your dad?" Emily's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Her hands trembled slightly as she held Grace. He tried to help her. Grace was sick, really sick, and he didn't know what to do." Sarah leaned in slightly. "What happened, sweetheart?" Emily's voice started to shake. Not from fear, but from the weight of words she didn't fully understand. Words she'd been carrying alone for too long. "My dad, he put something in her to make her better. But she got worse." Emily's lip trembled. And then he told us to stay here and he left." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Her blood went cold. A sick child. A father who put something in her and then disappeared. Every alarm in her head went off. Sarah reached for her radio immediately, her hand steady even as her mind raced. "Dispatch, this is Officer Mitchell. I need paramedics and child services at Riverside Park, southeast corner, immediately. 2 minors, younger one approximately 3 years old, critical condition, possible medical emergency, possible..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Possible intervention needed." Emily's eyes went wide. "Are we in trouble?" "No, honey, no, you're not in trouble." Sarah moved closer, her voice soft but firm. "But your sister needs help right away, and I'm going to make sure she gets it." Within minutes, the peaceful park transformed. Sirens wailed. Paramedics rushed over with equipment. People stopped what they were doing and stared. The same people who'd walked past these girls just moments before. A paramedic knelt beside Grace, checking her pulse, her temperature. Fever of 103, severe dehydration. Breathing is labored. He looked at his partner. "We need to move now." As they lifted Grace onto a stretcher, Emily tried to follow, panic in her eyes. "I'm not leaving her." "It's okay," the paramedic said gently. "You can come with us." Sarah helped Emily into the ambulance. The little girl looked so small, so tired, like she'd been holding the world together with her bare hands for far too long. As the ambulance doors closed, Sarah stood in the middle of the park. She looked at the crowd gathering, at the people suddenly concerned, at the cardboard where the girls had been sitting, worn, like it had been there for days. And Sarah thought, they were here, right here in plain sight. And no one stopped. Not until it was almost too late. The ambulance raced through the streets, sirens cutting through the afternoon air. Emily sat on the bench beside Grace's stretcher, gripping her sister's small hand like letting go would mean losing her forever. Grace's eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow and raspy. A paramedic adjusted the oxygen mask over her tiny face. "Grace, honey, stay with us," the paramedic said gently, checking her vitals. "We're almost there." Emily watched every move, her face pale but determined. She'd been watching over Grace for so long, it was the only thing she knew how to do anymore. Sarah sat across from them, studying Emily carefully. The girl's clothes were too big, hanging loose on her thin frame. Her hair needed washing. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But it was the way Emily held Grace's hand, firm, protective, like a parent, that broke Sarah's heart. "Emily," Sarah said softly, "I need you to help me understand what happened." "Can you do that?" Emily nodded slowly, not taking her eyes off Grace. "You said your dad put something in Grace. What did he give her?" Emily's voice trembled. "Medicine, I think. He said it would help her fever." "What kind of medicine?" "I don't know." Emily's grip on Grace's hand tightened. "He mixed things together, in a cup. It smelled bad." Sarah kept her voice calm, even as her chest tightened. "Did he tell you what was in it?" Emily shook her head. "He just kept saying it would make her better, that we couldn't go to the hospital because—" She stopped. "Because why, sweetheart?" "Because we don't have money. And because—" Emily's voice got even quieter. "Because he said they'd take us away from him." Sarah felt something crack inside her. This father, whoever he was, had been so terrified of losing his daughters that he'd tried to treat a desperately sick child himself, with something homemade, something dangerous. "Emily, what happened after your dad gave Grace the medicine?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. She started crying, really, really hard. She said her throat hurt. And then she got sick. She threw up. Dad got so scared. He kept saying, I'm sorry, over and over. And then, Emily's voice broke. And then he walked away. He told us to wait in the park, that he'd come back. But he didn't. How long ago was that? I don't know. 3 days, maybe? I stopped counting. Sarah's throat tightened. 3 days. These children had been alone, Grace getting sicker and sicker, while Emily, a 10-year-old, tried desperately to keep her alive. Emily, Sarah said gently, you've been very brave, taking care of your sister like this, but you shouldn't have had to. Emily looked up, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what else to do. Grace needed help, but I was scared. I was scared if I asked someone, they'd take us away, that we'd be separated. So I just tried to keep her safe. The words hung in the air, heavy, heartbreaking, true. The ambulance pulled into Mercy Hospital. The back doors flew open. Medical staff rushed Grace inside, Emily running alongside, refusing to let go of her hand. In the emergency room, doctors swarmed. One of them, Dr. Pemberton, took charge immediately. Female, approximately 3 years old, high fever, severe dehydration, possible ingestion of unknown substance. He examined Grace quickly, his expression growing more serious. Get me a full toxicology screen, chest x-ray, blood work, Page Pediatrics immediately. A nurse gently pulled Emily aside. Sweetie, the doctors need space to work. You can watch from right here, okay? Emily pressed herself against the window, her small hands flat against the glass, watching every movement inside. Sarah stood beside her. She pulled out her phone and called Child Services. This is Officer Mitchell. I need immediate response at Mercy Hospital. 2 minors, no guardian present. Younger one critical. Father is missing. Last seen approximately 3 days ago after allegedly giving the child a homemade remedy. She paused, looking at Emily's reflection in the glass. And I need someone here who understands that this little girl has been trying to save her sister all by herself. Margaret Hayes, a social worker with 20 years of experience, arrived within the hour. She took one look at Emily, small, exhausted, still pressed against that window, and her heart broke. "Officer Mitchell?" Sarah turned. "That's Emily Bennett. Her sister Grace is in there. Their mother is deceased. Father is missing." Margaret's voice was quiet. "What are we dealing with? A family that fell apart, and a 10-year-old who tried to hold it together alone." Margaret nodded slowly. She'd seen cases like this before. Not abuse, not cruelty, but collapse. Complete, devastating collapse. She approached Emily gently. "Hi, Emily, my name is Margaret. I'm here to help you and Grace." Emily didn't take her eyes off the window. "Is she going to be okay?" "The doctors are doing everything they can." "I tried to keep her safe," Emily whispered. "I really tried." Margaret knelt beside her. "I know you did, sweetheart, and you did an amazing job. But now it's time to let the adults help." Emily finally looked at her, tears streaming down her face. "Everyone keeps asking me what my dad did, but nobody's asking why we needed help in the first place." The words hit Margaret like a freight train, because Emily was right. Everyone wanted to know who did this, but no one was asking how a family could fall apart so completely that a 10-year-old became the only thing standing between her sister and death. Within an hour, Riverside Park had transformed completely. Yellow police tape stretched across the area where Emily and Grace had been sitting. Officers moved through the grass, photographing the cardboard, the empty juice boxes, the small backpack with crackers inside. News vans lined the street, their cameras pointed at the scene. And people, dozens of them, crowded around the perimeter, watching, whispering, recording on their phones. Detective Laura Brennan arrived and immediately took control. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and direct. She'd worked hundreds of cases, but something about this one already felt different. She walked over to the young officer securing the scene. "What do we know?" "2 minors found here approximately 2 hours ago. Younger one transported to Mercy Hospital in critical condition. Older sister Emily Bennett, age 10, says their father left them here 3 days ago after giving the younger one some kind of homemade remedy." Laura's jaw tightened. "And the father?" "David Bennett, 38. No criminal record. Mother deceased approximately 11 months ago. Alert's been issued." Laura looked around the park, at families still playing, at joggers still running, at people going about their day like nothing had happened. "How many people come through this park daily?" "Hundreds, maybe thousands." Laura knelt down and examined the cardboard where the girls had been sitting. It was worn, flattened from use. There were stains. It had clearly been there for days. These children had been living here, right here, in the open. "I want everyone who was in this park today interviewed," Laura said, "and I want to know if anyone saw these girls before today." As officers began canvassing, a reporter ducked under the tape. "Detective, can you confirm 2 children were abandoned here?" Laura turned, her expression unreadable. "We're investigating. That's all I can say right now." "Is it true the father is missing?" No further comment, but it was too late. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. 2 girls found alone in park, father missing after child falls ill investigation. Underway, back at the tape line, officers were questioning witnesses. A middle-aged man stepped forward. "I jog through here every morning. I think I saw those girls a few days ago, same spot." "Did you speak to them?" "No. I figured they were waiting for someone. A woman with a coffee cup. I walk my dog here twice a day. I remember seeing the older girl trying to share food with the younger one. I thought about asking if they were okay, but I was running late." A teenager. "I saw them yesterday. The little one looked really sick, but I thought someone nearby was watching them." One by one, people confessed. They'd seen, they'd noticed, they'd wondered, but they'd all kept walking. An older woman approached, her face pale. I walked past them this morning. The older girl looked right at me. Her voice cracked. And I thought they must be with someone. Someone nearby is probably taking care of them. She covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. But no one was. And I just walked away. Detective Brennan listened to each confession, her expression unchanging. But inside something was building. Not anger, but a deep, uncomfortable recognition. She turned to Officer Carter, who was taking notes. How does this happen? How do two children sit in a public park for days and no one stops? Carter looked at the crowd. Because everyone assumes someone else already did. Laura's phone buzzed. It was Margaret Hayes from the hospital. Laura, it's Margaret. Grace is stable but serious. Severe pneumonia, dehydration, malnutrition. And there are chemical burns in her throat. Whatever the father gave her was acidic. Laura closed her eyes briefly. Prognosis? She'll recover. But if Emily hadn't been caring for her these past few days... Margaret didn't finish the sentence. What about Emily? Exhausted, malnourished, and carrying guilt that no 10-year-old should ever have to carry. Laura looked back at the park, at the cardboard, at the crowd, at the officers still interviewing witnesses. Margaret, everyone here is asking the same question. Who did this? But I'm starting to think that's the wrong question. What's the right one? How did we let this happen? There was a pause on the line. I don't think people are ready for that answer, Margaret said quietly. Maybe not. But they're going to hear it anyway. Laura hung up and addressed the gathered officers. I want a timeline. I want to know how long this family has been in trouble. Where they lived before. When they lost their home. When the mother died. Everything. One officer raised his hand. Detective, what are we looking for exactly? Laura looked at him. We're looking for all the moments someone could have helped and didn't. As the sun began to set over Riverside Park, the news crews packed up. The crowd slowly dispersed. The officers finished their reports, but the cardboard remained still flattened where two little girls had sat, where people had walked past, where someone had murmured almost like an excuse. Someone must be taking care of them. And no one had been. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the scene watching it all. She thought about the older woman who'd hesitated, about the jogger who'd seen them days ago, about everyone who'd noticed but hadn't stopped. They were here, Sarah thought, in plain sight, and we all just assumed someone else was watching, until it was almost too late. 1 year earlier. The Bennett apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a living room that barely fit a couch. But it was home. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window on a Saturday morning. The smell of pancakes filled the air. Laughter echoed off the walls. Rebecca Bennett stood at the stove, her red hair, the same vibrant shade as her daughter's, pulled back in a loose bun. She hummed softly as she flipped pancakes, a slight smile on her tired but content face. Emily sat at the table, coloring in a workbook. Grace was in her high chair, banging a plastic spoon and giggling. Almost ready, Rebecca said, sliding pancakes onto plates. Emily, can you get the syrup, honey? Emily hopped up. Can I have chocolate chips? Just a few. Rebecca winked. David walked in from the bedroom, pulling on his jacket for work. He looked younger then, less worn, less hollow. He kissed Rebecca on the cheek. Smells amazing. Sit. You need to eat before your shift. David sat down next to Emily and tapped Grace's nose. How's my little troublemaker? Grace squealed with delight, reaching for him. For a moment, everything was perfectly, beautifully ordinary. Rebecca knew exactly when Grace would wake up at night. She knew which drawer held the children's medicine. She knew Emily's teacher's name, Grace's favorite toy, how to stretch a tight budget into a full week of meals. Rebecca was the map of their family. She held all the invisible knowledge that kept everything running. And when she got sick, she took that map with her. It started with a cough, just a small one. It's nothing, Rebecca insisted when David suggested she see a doctor. Just a cold. I'll be fine. But it wasn't nothing. Within 2 weeks, the cough got worse. She couldn't catch her breath. She started missing work. One morning, David found her sitting on the edge of the bed, wheezing, unable to stand. We're going to the hospital, he said. his voice tight with fear. "David, we can't afford— I don't care, we're going." At the emergency room, doctors admitted her immediately. Pneumonia, severe. They kept her for observation, then treatment, then longer. Emily and Grace stayed with Mrs. Chen, their neighbor, a kind woman who did her best. But Emily lay awake every night staring at the ceiling, wondering when Mama would come home. David tried to hold everything together. He worked. He visited the hospital. He paid bills he couldn't afford. He smiled when the girls asked about their mother. But inside he was drowning. The medical bills piled up. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. David started missing shifts to be at the hospital. His boss was understanding at first, then less so. "I'm sorry, David, we need reliable people. If you can't be here, I'll be here, I promise." But he couldn't be everywhere at once. 3 weeks after Rebecca was admitted, David came home alone. Emily was sitting on Mrs. Chen's couch with Grace when he walked in. She took one look at his face and knew. "Daddy," she whispered. David sank to the floor and pulled her into his arms. He couldn't speak. He just held her while his shoulders shook with silent sobs. Grace didn't understand. She kept asking, "Where's Mama? When is Mama coming home?" Emily looked at her father's broken face and understood. Mama wasn't coming home, not ever. The funeral was quiet. A few neighbors came, some of David's co-workers. The girls sat in the front row, Grace on David's lap, Emily holding his hand. David stared at the casket and thought, "How do I do this alone? How do I be both of us?" He didn't have an answer. After the funeral, David sat in the dark living room for hours. Days. He stopped answering his phone, stopped opening mail, stopped doing anything except staring at the walls. Emily learned quickly. She made peanut butter sandwiches for Grace. She turned on cartoons to keep her quiet. She didn't ask Daddy for things anymore because he didn't seem to hear her. The eviction notice came 2 months later. David held it in his hands, reading the same words over and over, but they wouldn't make sense. "We'll figure it out," he said to Emily, his voice hollow. "We'll find somewhere else." But there was nowhere else. No family nearby, no savings left, no job to fall back on. He'd been let go weeks ago and hadn't told anyone. Rebecca had known how to ask for help. She'd known which agencies to call, which forms to fill out, which neighbors to lean on. But Rebecca was gone, and David didn't know how to navigate a world without her. So they moved into his car, then a shelter, then another shelter, then nowhere at all. And slowly, so slowly that no one noticed, David stopped being a father. Not because he didn't love his daughters, but because he didn't know how to keep living without the person who'd taught him how. The scene fades. David sitting alone in the dark apartment after the funeral, head in his hands, completely still. Rebecca's coffee mug still on the counter. Her sweater still on the back of the chair. Her map gone. 4 months after Rebecca's death. David sat in his car in a grocery store parking lot, staring at the final eviction notice. The paper trembled in his hands. "You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." In the back seat, Emily had created a small nest of blankets for herself and Grace. Grace was asleep, her thumb in her mouth. Emily was awake, watching her father with worried eyes. "Daddy, are we going inside?" David didn't answer immediately. His mind felt like static, loud but empty. He'd stopped going to job interviews weeks ago, couldn't focus, couldn't remember why he'd walked into rooms. Some days he forgot to eat. "Not today, sweetheart. But we need food." David looked at the crumpled bills in the cup holder. $9. That was all. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll go tomorrow." But tomorrow never seemed to come. When the sheriff came to enforce the eviction, David was sitting on the floor of the empty apartment, surrounded by boxes he hadn't packed. "Mr. Bennett, I'm sorry, but you need to leave now." David stood slowly, like his body weighed 1,000 pounds. He gathered what little they had, 2 duffel bags, some clothes, Grace's favorite stuffed animal. "Where will you go?" the sheriff asked, not unkindly. David didn't have an answer. They went to a shelter on the east side. It had rules, strict ones, no staying during the day. 2-week maximum, Check in by 7 p.m. or lose your bed. David tried. Some days he managed, but other days he'd lose track of time, sitting on a bench somewhere, staring at nothing, unable to move. Emily became the one who watched the clock, who made sure they arrived on time, who kept Grace quiet so they wouldn't get in trouble. She was 10 years old, but she'd learned to think like someone much older. One night they were turned away. David had been late, forgot what day it was, forgot where he was supposed to be. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett," the shelter coordinator said. "Rules are rules. We gave your beds to another family." David stood there, holding Grace, Emily beside him. He wanted to argue, to explain, but words wouldn't come. So they walked to Riverside Park. It was quiet, empty, safe. David found a spot near the trees, away from the main paths. "We'll camp here tonight," he told the girls. "Just one night, until I figure something out." But one night became 2, then 3, then a week. Emily found a corner store where she could buy bread with the few dollars David occasionally gave her. She filled water bottles at the park fountain. She kept Grace as clean as possible in the public restroom. She never complained, never cried where anyone could see, because someone had to hold things together. Then Grace got sick. It started small, a cough, a runny nose. Emily thought it would pass. It didn't. Grace's fever climbed. She stopped eating. Her breathing became labored, wheezing. She cried through the night. Emily begged her father, "Daddy, she needs a doctor, please." David's eyes were wild, panicked. "We can't. They'll ask questions. They'll take you both away. I can't lose you too." "But she's really sick." "I'll fix it," David said, his voice breaking. "I'll fix it, I promise." He pulled out his phone, battery nearly dead, and searched desperately. Natural remedies for child fever. How to cure pneumonia at home. What to do when you can't afford medical care. The websites promised solutions. Easy, natural, safe. Written by people who claimed doctors didn't want you to know these secrets. David went to a dollar store and bought vinegar, honey, cayenne pepper. He mixed them together, following instructions from a blog, not noticing the warning at the bottom. Not intended to replace professional medical advice. "Grace, baby, drink this," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "It'll help, I promise." Grace took a sip and immediately started screaming. The mixture burned her throat, her mouth, her chest. No, it's okay." David's hands shook as he tried to calm her. "Just a little more. Please." But Grace turned away, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Emily watched from a few feet away, terrified, helpless. Over the next 2 days, Grace got worse. She stopped crying, stopped moving, just lay on the cardboard, breathing shallow and weak. David sat with his back against a tree, staring at nothing. His mind was fracturing, breaking under the weight of grief and failure and fear. "I'm killing her, just like I killed everything else. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to do this. I should have asked for help, but I thought I could still handle it just one more day." And then, on the 3rd morning, something inside David snapped completely. His mind simply shut down. A desperate escape from unbearable reality. He stood up, looked at Emily and Grace, his daughters, his responsibility, his failure, and he walked away. Not planned, not decided. His body just moved while his mind went somewhere else entirely. Emily woke up an hour later. "Daddy?" She looked around. He wasn't there. "Daddy!" she called louder, panic rising, but he was gone. And Emily was alone with her dying sister in a park full of people who never stopped. 2 days after David disappeared, Emily sat in a quiet room at Mercy Hospital. The walls were pale yellow. There was a box of tissues on the table she hadn't touched yet. A woman sat across from her, Margaret Hayes, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "Emily," Margaret said softly, "I know you've answered a lot of questions already, but I need to understand what happened so we can help you and Grace. Is that okay?" Emily nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Tell me about what your dad gave Grace. Do you remember?" Emily's voice was quiet, careful. "He said it was medicine. He looked it up on his phone. He mixed things together." What kind of things? I don't know all of them. Vinegar, I think, and honey. And something that looked red, like pepper. Margaret wrote carefully, her face neutral even as her heart broke. And what happened after Grace drank it? She started crying, really hard. She said it hurt. Emily's voice wavered. I tried to help, but I didn't know what to do. Did your dad try to give her more? He wanted to, but she wouldn't drink it, so he stopped. Margaret set her pen down. Emily, did your dad ever try to hurt you or Grace on purpose? Emily looked confused. No. He was scared. He thought the medicine would help. He kept saying, I should have asked for help, but I thought I could handle it one more day. Each word Emily spoke was being weighed by adults who already expected the worst. Not because Emily was lying, but because the words sounded darker than the truth behind them. And when did your dad leave? 3 mornings ago. He just walked away. He told us to wait, that he'd come back. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I thought maybe he just needed to think. But he didn't come back, and Grace kept getting sicker. What did you do? I tried to keep her comfortable. I gave her water from the fountain. I held her when she cried. Emily's voice broke, but I didn't know how to make her better. I kept thinking someone would notice, someone would help, but everyone just walked past. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Emily, you did everything you could, more than any 10-year-old should ever have to do. But it wasn't enough. That's not your fault, sweetheart. You were a child trying to survive an impossible situation. Emily looked down at her hands. Everyone keeps asking what Daddy did, but nobody's asking why we were there in the first place, why we didn't have a home, why no one helped us before it got this bad. The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. Because Emily was absolutely right. Everyone wanted to know who caused this. But no one was asking how a family could fall apart so completely that a 10-year-old became the only thing standing between her sister and death. You're right, Margaret said quietly. That's a very important question, and I promise you, we're going to look at all of it. Not just what your dad did, but everything that led to this moment. Are you going to take us away? Put us in different homes? Right now, you and Grace need to be somewhere safe while she gets better. That might mean staying with a foster family for a little while, but we'll do everything we can to keep you together. I don't want to leave Grace. She needs me. I know, and we'll make sure you can see her every day. There was a knock on the door. Officer Sarah Mitchell stepped in. Margaret, can I speak with you? Margaret excused herself and stepped into the hallway with Sarah. We traced David's phone, Sarah said. Last ping was 40 miles east, near a bus station. We're coordinating with neighboring counties. Do you think he's dangerous? I think he's broken. Sarah looked back through the window at Emily. That little girl still loves her father, even after everything. Children are resilient like that, Margaret said. Sometimes too resilient. They find ways to love people who've hurt them. The question is, what do we do when we find him? Margaret sighed. Legally, he's facing serious charges: medical neglect, child endangerment, abandonment. But charging him doesn't change what Emily just said in there. It doesn't answer why this family fell through every safety net we're supposed to have. Sarah crossed her arms. So what are we doing? Punishing one man or fixing a system? I don't know yet, Margaret said, but I'm starting to think we need to do both. Inside the room, Emily had finally picked up a tissue. She wiped her eyes, then carefully folded it and placed it on the table. Even now, she was trying to be good. Trying not to make a mess. Trying not to be a burden. Margaret returned and sat back down. Emily, there's something I want you to understand. What happened to you and Grace? It wasn't just your father's failure. A lot of people failed you. Emily looked up. Your father should have asked for help, but the people around you should have offered it. The systems meant to protect children should have found you before things got this bad. So, it's not just his fault? No. It's a lot of people's fault, including those of us whose job it is to make sure families don't fall through the cracks. Emily sat with that for a moment. I just want Grace to get better, and I want my dad to not be so sad anymore. Margaret's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I know, sweetheart. I know. Detective Laura Brennan sat at her desk, reviewing the thin file on David Bennett. His driver's license photo showed a man from 3 years ago. Before loss, before collapse, before everything fell apart. She picked up her phone. This is Detective Brennan. I need an expanded alert on David Bennett. Last known location. Bus station 40 miles east. Extend search radius to 100 miles. Subject may be experiencing severe mental health crisis. Is he considered dangerous? The dispatcher asked. Laura paused. No, he's not violent. He's lost. Approach with care, not force. She hung up and turned to Officer Carter, who'd just arrived with case notes. What did you find on the family history? Carter opened his notepad. David Bennett, 38. Wife Rebecca died 11 months ago from pneumonia. Medical bills bankrupted them. He lost his job 4 months later, too many absences. Evicted 6 months ago. After that, they disappeared. What about family? Friends? Rebecca's parents are deceased. David's family is out of state. He hasn't contacted them in over a year. Friends stopped calling after Rebecca died. He pushed everyone away. Laura shook her head. So he was completely isolated. Completely. And here's the thing. Emily was enrolled at Lincoln Elementary, but when she stopped showing up, the school filed a report. It went to the district office and got buried in paperwork. No one ever followed up. So they vanished, and nobody noticed. Not nobody, Carter said. People noticed. They just assumed someone else was handling it. Laura pulled up social media. The story had exploded online. Find David Bennett. Justice for Grace. Who did this comments ranged from outrage to sympathy. Some called David a monster. Others defended him as a grieving father who'd lost his way. One comment caught her eye. I saw those girls in the park last week. I thought about stopping. I didn't. That's on me. Laura closed her laptop. Her phone rang. It was Dr. Pemberton from the hospital. Detective, I'm sending over Grace's full medical report. You need to see this. What did you find? The substance David gave Grace caused chemical burns in her throat and triggered a severe reaction. But that's not what nearly killed her. Laura's chest tightened. What do you mean? Grace has been suffering from severe malnutrition, chronic dehydration, and untreated pneumonia for weeks, possibly months. The homemade remedy was dangerous, yes. But it was just the tipping point. This child was already dying slowly. Jesus. I'm writing this in my report. This child didn't get sick in one day. She got sick slowly, over weeks and months while living in plain sight. Laura thanked him and hung up. She stared at the caseboard. Photos of Emily and Grace, the park, David's last known locations. This wasn't a simple case of one bad decision. This was a family that had been falling apart in slow motion while the world looked away. Her partner, Detective Mike Reyes, walked in. Got a lead. David was spotted at a homeless shelter about 30 miles west. Staff said he seemed confused, couldn't remember his own name. When? This morning. Laura grabbed her coat. Let's go. As they drove, Reyes spoke. You know what bothers me about this? What? Everyone wants to know who's responsible, who did this, but the answer isn't one person. Laura glanced at him. Go on. The neighbors who saw them struggling. The school that didn't follow up. The people in the park who walked past 2 homeless kids every single day. He paused. We all did this. We just don't want to admit it. Laura thought about Sarah's words from the park. They were there, and no one stopped. Yeah, she said quietly. I think you're right. They arrived at the shelter, a simple building with a fading sign. All are welcome. Inside, the coordinator led them to a small room. He's been here 3 days. Barely speaks. Barely eats. Just sits and stares. Laura entered slowly. David Bennett sat on a cot, hunched over, his head in his hands. He was thinner than his photo, unshaven, wearing clothes that hadn't been washed in days. Mr. Bennett? Laura said gently. David looked up slowly. His eyes were hollow, empty, like someone who'd already left this world. I'm Detective Brennan. I need you to come with me. David's voice was barely a whisper. Are my daughters alive? Yes. They're safe. Grace is in the hospital, but she's going to be okay. David collapsed forward, sobbing, deep, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere broken inside him. Laura let him cry. She'd seen people lie before. Smooth, practiced, calculating. This wasn't that. This was a man who'd shattered completely. After a few moments, she spoke. David, I need you to stand up. You're under arrest for child endangerment and abandonment. David didn't resist. He simply stood, holding out his hands. As Laura placed the handcuffs on him, David whispered, I should have asked for help. I kept thinking I could handle it. Just one more day. Just one more. Laura felt something crack in her chest. I know. Please, tell Emily I'm sorry. Tell her I love her. Tell her I never meant for any of this. I will. They led him out to the patrol car. Reporters were already there, cameras flashing. Mr. Bennett, why did you abandon your children? David kept his head down, silent. Inside the car, Laura looked at him in the rearview mirror. David, everyone wants a simple answer to this. A villain. Someone to blame. But I don't think you're a villain. David looked up, surprised. I think you're a man who broke, and no one caught you before you fell. David's eyes filled with tears again, and Laura drove him back to Millbrook, carrying the weight of a truth no one wanted to hear. Sometimes the people who cause the most harm are the ones who needed help the most. The story exploded. By the time Detective Brennan arrived back at the station with David Bennett in custody, news vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The crowd pressed against the barriers. Mr. Bennett, why did you leave your daughters? Did you try to poison your child? Do you have anything to say to the families watching? David kept his head down, silent, as officers led him inside. Within hours, the headlines were everywhere. Father arrested after abandoning sick daughters. Homeless man gives child dangerous homemade remedy. 2 girls found alone. Father facing charges. The story spread across social media like wildfire. Some comments were furious. Lock him up and throw away the key, those poor babies. How could anyone do this to their own children? He deserves everything that's coming to him. Others were more sympathetic. Mental illness is real. This man needed help, not judgment. We don't know the full story. Let's wait before condemning him. But one thing was universal. Everyone had an opinion. Television panels debated. Talk show hosts discussed. Everyone seemed certain they knew exactly what had happened and exactly who was to blame. And no one, not one person, mentioned the park. No one said, I walked past those children and did nothing. No one admitted, I saw them and assumed someone else was handling it. The narrative had been decided. 1 bad father, 2 innocent victims, justice served. Simple, clean, satisfying. At Mercy Hospital, Emily sat beside Grace's bed. Grace was awake now, still weak but improving. An IV drip fed fluids into her small arm. Her color was better, her breathing easier. Emmy? Grace's voice was soft, raspy. I'm here, Gracie. Where's Daddy? Emily's throat tightened. She didn't know how to answer. She'd heard nurses whispering. Heard words like arrested and charges and dangerous. But her daddy wasn't dangerous, he was just sad. So sad. He's getting help, Emily finally said. So he can get better, just like you. Grace accepted this easily, the way children do. Okay, can we go home soon? Home. Emily didn't know where that was anymore. Margaret Hayes entered the room quietly. Hi, girls. Grace, you're looking much better. Grace gave a small smile. Margaret sat down beside Emily. Emily, I need to talk to you about something. Is that okay? Emily nodded. There are a lot of people talking about your family right now. On the news, online. Some of them are saying things that might not be true, or might not be the whole truth. Like what? Like saying your dad is a bad person, or that he hurt you on purpose. Emily's eyes widened. But he didn't. He was trying to help. I know, but people don't always understand complicated situations. They want simple answers. So what happens now? Margaret hesitated. Your dad is going to have to go to court. A judge will decide what happens next. And in the meantime, you and Grace will stay in a safe place, probably with a foster family. Can't we stay with Daddy? Not right now, I'm sorry. Emily looked down at Grace's small hand in hers. Will they let me visit him? I'll do everything I can to make that happen. At the police station, David sat in an interrogation room. His hands were cuffed to the table. Detective Brennan sat across from him, a recorder between them. David, I'm going to read you your rights. You have the right to remain silent. I don't want to be silent, David interrupted, his voice hoarse. I need to tell the truth. Laura paused. You should wait for a lawyer. I don't care about a lawyer. I care about my daughters knowing the truth. Laura studied him. All right, tell me what happened. David took a shaky breath. When Rebecca died, I thought I could handle it. Everyone kept saying, you're so strong, you'll get through this. But I wasn't strong, I was drowning, and I didn't know how to ask for help. Why not? Because asking for help felt like admitting I'd failed Rebecca, failed my girls. His voice cracked. I kept thinking, just one more day, just hold on one more day. But the days kept coming and I kept falling further behind. What about Grace? Why didn't you take her to a hospital when she got sick? David's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I was terrified. Terrified they'd see how bad things had gotten. Terrified they'd take my daughters away. So I tried to fix it myself. With the homemade remedy. I looked it up online. People said it worked. Natural, safe. I trusted them because I was desperate. He covered his face with his hands, and I made it worse. I hurt her when I was trying to save her. And then you left them in the park. I didn't plan to leave. I swear. I went for a walk to clear my head and I kept walking. My mind shut down. I couldn't think. Couldn't remember why I'd started walking or where I was supposed to go. When I finally came to, I was miles away. And I was so scared I couldn't go back. Laura listened, taking notes. Everything he said matched what Emily had described, what the evidence showed. This wasn't a monster. This was a man who'd broken under unbearable weight. David, do you understand you're going to face serious charges? Yes. And you could go to prison. I know. He looked up at her. But please make sure Emily and Grace know I love them, that I never meant for any of this, that I'm sorry. Laura nodded slowly. I'll make sure they know. That evening, the community held a vigil in Riverside Park. Candles flickered in the growing darkness. People gathered, neighbors, strangers, reporters. A woman who lived near the park spoke into a microphone. We're here tonight to show our support for Emily and Grace, to stand against neglect and abuse. The crowd applauded, but in the back a few people stood quietly, not clapping. The older woman who'd walked past the girls, the jogger who'd seen them days earlier, the teenager who'd noticed Grace looking sick. They didn't hold candles. They didn't speak. They just stood there, carrying a different kind of weight. Because while everyone else was asking who did this, they were asking themselves, why didn't I stop? And they didn't have an answer they were ready to say out loud. Not yet. Dr. Pemberton sat in his office, reviewing Grace's complete medical file one more time before submitting his official report to the court. He'd been a pediatrician for 23 years. He'd seen neglect before. He'd seen abuse. He'd seen accidents and tragedies and preventable suffering. But this case sat differently. He picked up his pen and began writing the summary that would be read by judges, lawyers, social workers, and possibly the public. Medical report. Grace Bennett, age 3. Primary findings: severe pneumonia, untreated approximately 3 to 4 weeks duration. Chronic malnutrition, progressive over several months. Dehydration, acute and severe. Chemical burns to throat and esophagus, caused by acidic homemade mixture. Multiple minor infections, skin, ear, respiratory. Clinical assessment, the substance. Administered by the father, a mixture of vinegar, honey, and cayenne pepper. Caused immediate harm. chemical burns, vomiting, and increased distress. However, this was not the primary threat to the child's life. Grace Bennett was already critically ill before this incident. The pneumonia alone, left untreated for weeks, was life-threatening. Combined with malnutrition and dehydration, this child was in a slow, progressive medical crisis. Critical observation. This child did not become sick overnight. She became sick gradually, visibly, over weeks and possibly months, while living in public spaces where hundreds of people passed daily. Dr. Pemberton paused, his pen hovering over the paper. He added one more line. The question is not only what happened to this child, but how did this happen in plain sight without intervention? He signed the report and placed it in the envelope. Later that afternoon, the report was delivered to Judge Marion Lawson's chambers. She read it twice, slowly, her expression growing more troubled with each line. She set it down and looked at her assistant. Schedule a community hearing. I want social services, police, hospital staff, and representatives from the school district present. When? As soon as possible. The public wants answers, and I think it's time they hear the whole truth, not just the easy parts. Back at the hospital, Margaret sat with Emily in the small family room. She held a copy of Dr. Pemberton's report. Emily, the doctor wrote something about Grace that I think you should hear. Emily looked up, nervous. Margaret read aloud. This child didn't get sick in one day. She got sick slowly over time while people watched. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I tried to get help. I tried to tell people, but everyone just kept walking. I know you did, sweetheart. And that's exactly what the doctor is saying. This wasn't just your father's failure. It was everyone's. Emily wiped her eyes. So, people will understand now? Margaret hesitated. Some will. Some won't want to. Because understanding means admitting they could have helped and didn't. That's scary for them. Margaret looked at this 10-year-old girl with old, wise eyes. Yes, it is. Emily looked out the window toward the park in the distance. I just want people to know Grace didn't get invisible in one day. We all did, little by little, until no one saw us anymore. Margaret wrote that down, word for word, because Emily had just said what the entire case was really about. 3 days after his arrest, David Bennett sat in a small interrogation room with his court-appointed attorney, James Riordan. Riordan was in his 50s, experienced, and he'd seen hundreds of cases. But when he met David, he didn't see a criminal. He saw a man who'd shattered. David, the prosecutor, is pushing for maximum charges. Child endangerment, reckless endangerment, abandonment. You're looking at serious prison time. David stared at his hands. I understand. But I think we have a defense. Diminished capacity due to untreated grief and mental health crisis. The court could consider... No. Riordan paused. No. I don't want to hide behind excuses. I want to tell the truth. David's voice was steady for the first time in days. I failed my daughters. I should have asked for help. I should have done 100 things differently, and I didn't. David, if you plead guilty without any mitigation, you could... I know. David looked up, his eyes red but clear. But I need Emily and Grace to hear the truth from me. Not from lawyers, not from news reports, from me. Riordan sat back. All right. Then we request a statement hearing. You speak directly to the court. Can Emily be there? If she wants to be. David nodded. Then that's what I want. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. The courtroom was packed, reporters, social workers, community members, police officers. Emily sat in the front row with Margaret beside her. Grace was still in the hospital, too young to attend. David was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. When he saw Emily, his face crumpled. She gave him a small, sad wave. Judge Lawson entered. This is a preliminary hearing for David Bennett. Mr. Bennett, you've requested to make a statement? Yes, Your Honor. Proceed. David stood slowly. His voice shook, but he forced himself to speak. I want to start by saying, I'm sorry. To Emily, to Grace, to everyone who trusted me to protect them. He took a breath. When my wife died, I lost more than her. I lost the part of me that knew how to keep going. Rebecca was the one who held our family together. She knew what to do when things went wrong. I didn't. The courtroom was silent. After she died, I kept thinking I could handle it. That grief would pass, that I'd figure it out, but I didn't. I got worse. I lost my job. I lost our home. And I was too ashamed to ask for help. David's voice broke. When Grace got sick, I was terrified. Terrified of hospitals, terrified of being judged, terrified of losing my daughters. So I tried to fix it myself. I found something online that promised to help, and I believed it because I was desperate. He looked directly at Emily. I heard her when I was trying to save her, and then when I saw how bad things were, I couldn't handle it. My mind just shut down. I walked away because I couldn't face what I'd done. Tears streamed down his face. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking that my daughters know the truth. I loved them. I failed them. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't ask for help when I still could. He sat down, covering his face with his cuffed hands. Judge Lawson let the silence sit for a moment. Mr. Bennett, you'll remain in custody pending trial. But I want to be clear. This court recognizes that this case involves more than one individual's failure. She looked at the packed courtroom. Mental health crises, systemic poverty, and community negligence all played a role, and we will address all of it. She banged the gavel. As David was led away, he looked back at Emily one more time. She mouthed, "I love you, Daddy." And David nodded, tears falling, because even in the wreckage, love remained. Broken, complicated, painful, but still there. 2 weeks after the hearing, Emily sat in a bright, comfortable office with Dr. Sarah Winters, a child therapist with gray hair and kind eyes. "You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to," Dr. Winters said gently. "This is your space, your time." Emily sat on a soft chair, holding a stuffed animal someone had given her at the foster home. "Everyone keeps asking me questions. Police, lawyers, social workers. I don't always know what they want me to say." "What do you mean?" Emily thought carefully. "When Officer Mitchell asked me what happened, I said, 'My dad put something in her,' because I didn't know how else to explain it. I didn't know the word for gave her medicine that didn't work." Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. "So you chose words you barely understood?" "Yes." Emily's voice trembled, and everyone wrote it down like it meant something bad, like Daddy hurt Grace on purpose, but he didn't. He was just scared and didn't know what to do. Why do you think people heard it that way? Because they wanted to. Because it's easier to believe someone's a bad person than to believe someone just broke. Dr. Winters felt her chest tighten. This child, this 10-year-old, understood something most adults refuse to see. "Emily, can I tell you something?" Emily nodded. "You were put in an impossible situation. You were forced to be an adult when you should have been a child. And that's not fair. None of this is fair." "I know." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "But everyone acts like I'm a victim, like I can't think for myself, like I don't know what happened." "What did happen?" Emily took a deep breath. "My mom died. My dad couldn't handle it. He tried so hard, but he just kept falling. And everyone just watched us fall and did nothing. Why do you think no one helped? Because they thought someone else would, or because they didn't want to get involved, or because we became invisible." Dr. Winters set down her pen. "Emily, do you understand how extraordinary you are?" Emily looked confused. "What?" "You've been through something most adults couldn't survive. And instead of hating your father, instead of blaming the world, you're trying to make people understand the truth. I just don't want people to think Daddy's a monster. He's not. He's just broken. And what about you? How are you feeling?" Emily was quiet for a long moment. "Tired, really, really tired, like I've been holding my breath for months and I finally get to breathe. But I don't know how anymore." Dr. Winters nodded. "That makes sense. You've been in survival mode for so long, your body forgot how to just be. Will it get easier?" "Yes, slowly, with help. and with people who won't make you explain things in words you barely understand. Emily looked down at the stuffed animal in her lap. Can I ask you something? Of course. When I talk at the big hearing next week, will people actually listen? Or will they just hear what they want to hear? Dr. Winters hesitated. She wanted to promise that everyone would listen. But she'd been doing this work long enough to know better. Some people will listen, Emily. Really listen. Others won't be ready to hear what you have to say. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is just to tell your truth. What if my truth makes people uncomfortable? Then it's probably the truth they need to hear most. Emily sat with that for a moment. Then she said quietly but firmly, Okay, I'll tell it. Even if it's hard. That's very brave. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of people getting it wrong. Dr. Winters smiled sadly. Sometimes those are the same thing. That night, Emily lay in her foster home bed, staring at the ceiling. Grace was asleep in the bed next to hers, breathing soft and steady, so different from the raspy, painful breath she'd had in the park. Emily thought about the hearing coming up, about what she wanted to say. She thought about the words people had used, abandoned, neglected, endangered. And she thought about the words she wished they'd used. Grieving, lost, invisible. Words mattered, and Emily was going to make sure the right ones were finally heard. The community hearing was held in the largest courtroom in Millbrook. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls, camera crews lined the back. Judge Lawson sat at the bench, looking out at the crowd. We're here today not to assign blame, but to understand. To examine how a family in crisis became invisible in a community of thousands. She gestured to the panel of speakers. We'll hear from medical professionals, law enforcement, social services, and community members. And most importantly, we'll hear from those directly affected. Dr. Pemberton spoke first, presenting his findings. Grace Bennett was critically ill for weeks. Her condition was visible: malnourishment, fever, difficulty breathing. She wasn't hidden. She was in plain sight. Detective Brennan followed. Our investigation found that this family had contact with multiple systems: schools, shelters, neighbors, public services. But no single entity connected the dots. Everyone assumed someone else was handling it. Margaret Hayes spoke about systemic failures. When families fall through the cracks, it's not usually one big failure. It's 100 small ones. A missed follow-up call, a form lost in paperwork, a person who hesitated but didn't act. Then came the community members. The older woman who'd walked past the girls stood shakily. I saw them, I noticed them, and I told myself someone nearby must be watching them. Her voice cracked. But I was the one nearby, and I walked away. The jogger spoke next. I ran past those girls 3 times a week for who knows how long. I thought about stopping. I never did. A young mother. I saw the older girl trying to feed the younger one crackers. I thought it was sweet. 2 sisters playing. I didn't realize they were surviving. One by one, people confessed. Not to crimes, but to something harder to admit. Silence. The phrase echoed through the room, whispered like a prayer of regret. Someone must be taking care of it. Judge Lawson let the confession sit. Then she spoke. The question before us isn't just who harmed this child. The question is, how did we all allow this to happen? Silence filled the courtroom. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? The room remained quiet. People looked down, shifted in their seats. No one stood. Judge Lawson waited. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Emily, sitting in the front row with Margaret, felt her heart pounding. She looked around at all the adults, powerful, important adults, and realized, if she didn't speak, no one would. She stood up slowly. The room turned to look at her. This small, 10-year-old girl in a borrowed dress. Judge Lawson's expression softened. Emily, you don't have to. I want to, Emily said, her voice quiet but steady. Margaret squeezed her hand and let go. Emily walked to the microphone at the center of the room. Her hands trembled slightly. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. My name is Emily Bennett, and I want to tell you what really happened. The courtroom held its breath. Everyone keeps asking, who did this to Grace? Who's responsible? She paused, looking around at the sea of faces. But it wasn't just one person. Emily's voice grew stronger. My dad was responsible. He should have asked for help. He should have taken Grace to the hospital. He made bad choices. She took a breath. But he wasn't the only one. The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. All of you. Everyone who walked past us in the park, everyone who saw us struggling and looked away, everyone who thought, someone must be taking care of it. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. You were all responsible too. People shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others stared at Emily in shock. My dad didn't make us invisible in one day. We became invisible slowly, day by day, while people watched. Tears streamed down Emily's face. Grace didn't get sick because of one bad thing my dad did. She got sick because no one, not one person, stopped to help us before it was too late. She looked directly at the crowd. So when you ask, who did this to her? The answer isn't simple. It's all of us. My dad, yes. But also everyone who could have helped and didn't. The silence was deafening. Emily's final words came out as a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. We weren't hidden. We were just invisible, and that's worse. She stepped back from the microphone. No one clapped. No one spoke. They just sat there carrying the weight of a truth they'd been trying to avoid. Emily stood at the microphone, tears still wet on her cheeks. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, heavy, suffocating, true. Judge Lawson leaned forward gently. Emily, is there anything else you'd like to say? Emily wiped her eyes. Her voice was still shaking, but something had shifted. She wasn't scared anymore. She was determined. Yes. She looked out at the crowd, at the reporters, the neighbors, the people who'd gathered demanding justice. Everyone wants to know, who's the bad guy? Who do we punish so we can feel better? Her small hands gripped the edge of the podium. But punishing my dad won't bring back my mom. It won't erase the months we spent invisible. It won't change the fact that hundreds of people saw us and did nothing. Someone in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. My dad made mistakes. Really bad ones. He gave Grace something that hurt her. He left us alone when we needed him most. Emily's voice cracked. But you know what else? He was drowning, and not one person threw him a rope before he went under. The words landed like stones. You want to know what destroyed my family? It wasn't just my dad's grief. It wasn't just bad luck. It was loneliness. It was shame. It was everyone believing that someone else would help. She paused, letting the truth settle. My dad told me once before everything got really bad. I should ask for help. But I think I can hold on one more day. And he kept saying that. One more day, until there were no more days left. Margaret wiped tears from her own eyes. Emily's voice grew quieter but somehow stronger. So when you ask, who did this? The answer is hard, because it's not a monster you can lock away and forget about. She looked directly at the camera crews in the back. It's the person who walked past us and thought, someone must be taking care of them. Duke, it's the system that lost our paperwork and never followed up. It's the neighbor who noticed something was wrong but didn't want to intrude. Her voice rose, steady and clear. It's everyone who saw pain and turned away because it was easier than getting involved. The room was silent, uncomfortable, confronted. Emily took a shaky breath. I'm not saying my dad shouldn't face consequences. He should. But if all we do is punish him and walk away feeling like justice was served, then we learned nothing. She looked at Judge Lawson. Because somewhere right now, there's another family falling apart. Another kid trying to hold everything together alone. Another parent, too, ashamed to ask for help. Emily's final words came out raw and devastating. And if we don't change, if we keep walking past people in pain and assuming someone else will help, then we're just waiting for the next Grace. The next me. She stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the older woman who'd confessed earlier stood up. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't speak. She just stood there, shoulders shaking. Then the jogger stood. Then the young mother. One by one, people throughout the courtroom rose, Not in applause, but in acknowledgement, in silent, painful recognition of a truth they could no longer deny. Judge Lawson waited until everyone who would stand had stood. Then she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. This court recognizes that justice in this case cannot be simple. Mr. Bennett will face legal consequences for his actions. But this community, all of us, must also face what we've allowed to happen. She looked at Emily. Out of the mouths of children comes wisdom we're often too proud to hear. Emily Bennett has shown more courage and clarity than most adults in this room. She paused. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't cruelty. It's indifference. It's the quiet belief that someone else will step in, that someone else will care. Judge Lawson's voice was firm now. This hearing is not just about one family. It's about all of us, and what we choose to do next. She looked out at the crowd. Court adjourned. But our work, the real work, is just beginning. The gavel fell, and for the first time in months, Emily felt like someone had finally, truly listened. 3 months later, Grace sat in a pediatrician's office for her follow-up appointment. She was healthy now, her color back, her energy restored, her smile bright and real. Dr. Pemberton checked her chart. Lungs are clear. Weight is in normal range. You're doing wonderfully, Grace. Grace beamed and hugged her stuffed rabbit. Emily sat beside her, looking older somehow, not in years, but in the quiet confidence of someone who'd survived something impossible and come through it. How are you doing, Emily? Doctor, Pemberton asked. Better. We have a good foster family. Grace is happy. I'm back in school. And your father? Emily's expression grew complicated. He's in a treatment program. Court supervised. He writes me letters. We can visit him once a month. How does that feel? Hard, but honest. Emily looked down. He's getting help, real help, finally. Dr. Pemberton nodded. Healing isn't magic. It's slow, it's human, but it's real. David sat in a small room at the rehabilitation center, writing another letter to his daughters. His handwriting was shaky, but deliberate. Dear Emily and Grace, I think about you every single day. I'm learning things here. About grief, about asking for help, about how I let shame nearly destroy us. I don't expect you to forgive me quickly. I don't even expect you to forgive me at all. But I want you to know. I'm trying. Really trying this time. I'm not hiding anymore. He signed it and sealed the envelope. His counselor, Dr. Martinez, sat across from him. How are you feeling about the sentencing next month? Scared. But I deserve whatever comes. You're also getting help. That matters. David looked up. Does it? Does it matter if I'm better if I already broke everything? Yes, Dr. Martinez said firmly, because your daughters are watching, and they need to see that even broken people can heal. Not perfectly, not magically, but truly. David nodded slowly. At Riverside Park, things had changed. There was now a small community outreach station near the playground. A simple booth staffed by volunteers twice a week. A sign read, Need help? Ask here. No judgment. Sarah Mitchell stopped by during her patrol. A volunteer named Linda greeted her. We've had 12 families come by this month. Some just needed food. Others needed information about shelters, medical care, job programs. Any success stories? A single dad came last week, lost his job, behind on rent, didn't know where to turn. We connected him with housing assistance and a food bank. He cried, said he'd been too ashamed to ask anyone. Sarah felt something tighten in her chest. So we're catching people before they fall. Some of them, not all, but some. Sarah looked around the park, at children playing, families picnicking, people walking their dogs. It's not perfect, she said. No, Linda agreed. But it's better than it was. At Lincoln Elementary School, Emily's teacher, Ms. Hernandez, pulled her aside after class. Emily, I wanted to tell you, the school has implemented a new attendance tracking system. If a student misses more than 3 days without contact, we now send someone to check on them personally. No more lost paperwork. Emily looked surprised. Because of what happened to us? Partly, yes. Your story made people realize we can't just assume everything's fine. Emily nodded slowly. Good. Maybe it'll help someone else. That evening, Emily and Grace sat in their foster home's backyard. Their foster mother, Mrs. Kowalski, was kind, patient, warm, steady. Grace played with dolls in the grass. Emily sat on the porch steps watching her. Mrs. Kowalski brought out lemonade. "You okay, sweetheart?" "Yeah, just thinking." About? About how nothing fixed itself magically. Dad's still in trouble. We're still in foster care. Grace still has nightmares sometimes. Mrs. Kowalski sat beside her. But people are trying now, really trying. The park has the help booth. The school checks on kids. People stop and ask if others need help. Does that feel like enough? Emily thought carefully. It feels like a start, and maybe that's all we can ask for. Mrs. Kowalski put her arm around Emily's shoulders. You're wiser than most adults I know. Emily leaned into the hug. I just don't want anyone else to be invisible. Some people helped. Some kept walking. But now, at least, there were people who stayed. Not because the world had become perfect, but because a 10-year-old girl had forced them to see what they'd been ignoring. And slowly, painfully, imperfectly, humanly, things were beginning to change. 6 months later, Emily sat at her school desk, pencil in hand, staring at the assignment written on the board. Write about a moment that changed you. She thought for a long time. Then she began to write. At lunch, her teacher asked if she'd like to read her essay to the class. Emily hesitated, then nodded. She stood at the front of the room. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of truth she was choosing to share. My essay is called The Day We Became Visible. She read, For a long time, my sister and I were invisible. Not because we were hiding, but because people chose not to see us. We sat in a park where hundreds of people walked every day. We were hungry, we were scared. My sister was dying, and everyone walked past, not because they were bad people, but because they thought someone else would help. The day Officer Mitchell stopped, the day someone finally saw us, everything changed. Not magically, not instantly, but truly. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop, look, ask if someone needs help, because being invisible isn't about being hidden. It's about being seen and ignored, and that's the loneliest thing in the world. Emily looked up. Some of her classmates had tears in their eyes. She folded the paper and sat down. After class, 3 different kids came up to her, not to ask about the famous case, but to say, "Thank you for telling the truth." That afternoon, Emily and Grace went to Riverside Park with Mrs. Kowalski. It was the first time Emily had been back since that day. She walked slowly to the spot where they'd sat, the corner near the trees, away from the playground. The cardboard was gone now, replaced by grass and a small bench with a plaque. In memory of those who fall through the cracks. May we learn to see. Emily sat on the bench. Grace climbed up beside her, swinging her legs. Emmy, can I go play? Grace asked, pointing to the playground. Emily looked at her little sister. Healthy, happy, alive. Yeah, Gracie, go play. Grace ran off, laughing. Emily watched her. For the first time in so long, she wasn't scanning for danger, wasn't counting exits, wasn't preparing to run. She was just there, present. A woman walking by slowed down, noticed Emily sitting alone. She hesitated, then approached. Hi, sweetie, are you okay? Is someone with you? Emily looked up and smiled. A real smile. Yes, ma'am. My foster mom is right over there, and my sister's playing on the swings. The woman looked relieved. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you for asking, Emily said quietly. The woman smiled and walked on. Emily watched her go, feeling something warm settle in her chest. Someone stopped. Someone asked. It was such a small thing, but it was everything. Mrs. Kowalski came over with ice cream cones. Grace is making friends on the slide. Emily took the ice cream. Mrs. K? Yeah, honey? Do you think things will really change? Or will people forget and go back to how it was? Mrs. Kowalski sat beside her. I think some people will forget, but some won't, and that's enough to make a difference. Emily licked her ice cream thoughtfully. I hope so. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Grace play. After a while, Emily spoke again. I'm not scared anymore. Of what? Of being invisible, because I know now I never was. I was just waiting for someone brave enough to see. Mrs. Kowalski put her arm around Emily's shoulders, and together they watched Grace climb higher on the playground, laughing, fearless, free. 6 months later, final scene. Emily walked through Riverside Park on a Saturday morning. She was alone this time. Grace was at a birthday party. Mrs. Kowalski was running errands. She didn't need to come here, but she wanted to. She sat on the memorial bench and looked around. A man sat nearby, looking lost. A volunteer from the help booth approached him gently. Sir, can I help you with anything today? The man hesitated, then nodded. Emily watched them talk, watched the volunteer hand him a resource list, watched the man's shoulders relax slightly. One person, one moment, one connection. Emily thought about her father, still in treatment, still healing, still broken, but trying. She thought about Grace, thriving now. She thought about all the people who'd confessed. I saw, I didn't stop. And she thought about the ones who did stop now. Who asked? Who stayed? The world hadn't become perfect, but it had become a little less lonely. Emily stood up, ready to leave. But before she did, she touched the plaque on the bench one more time. May we learn to see. We're learning, she whispered, slowly. But we're learning. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily felt hope. Not the magic kind, the real kind. The kind built by ordinary people doing small, brave things every single day. She walked home, no longer invisible. Just present. Just enough. Final message. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't cruelty. It's the quiet suffering that grows while everyone believes someone must be taking care of it. The answer isn't punishment. It's presence. Stop. Look. Ask. Because the person right in front of you might be waiting for someone brave enough to see. Das sind's.